Welcome back to Fusty Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Isabella Raymond sat at the edge of her king-size bed, staring at the empty space where her husband should have been lying. Daniel had once promised her the world. Yet every night he chose to spend his hours with Vanessa Collins, the woman he shamelessly paraded in public as though Isabella did not exist. The mansion they lived in was filled with luxury, crystal chandeliers, Italian tiles, and the kind of wealth she once believed to bring happiness, but it was also filled with loneliness, silence, and rejection. Daniel's love had dried up long ago, replaced by scornful remarks that pierced deeper than knives. Each insult reminded Isabella that in his eyes she was not a wife, but a burden he endured until someone better came along. What pained her most was not the wealth Daniel wasted on Vanessa's designer handbags or the expensive dinners he flaunted online, but the way he deliberately humiliated Isabella in front of people who once respected her. He would mock her cooking, her clothing, even her quiet nature. Friends who once admired her had withdrawn, embarrassed to witness her constant degradation. Nights alone in her room, she cried silently, clutching her Bible to her chest, the only anchor keeping her from breaking completely. She prayed for a miracle, a day when her pain would no longer define her existence. Little did she know, her prayers would soon lead her on a journey that would rewrite her destiny. The grand ballroom glittered with chandeliers as Daniel strutted in proudly with Vanessa by his side. Isabella followed quietly behind, dressed modestly compared to the mistress draped in diamonds and silk. She had begged Daniel not to bring her, but he insisted, only to make her his object of ridicule. The laughter and whispers of the guests echoed in Isabella's ears as Daniel loudly compared her unfavorably to Vanessa, calling her dull and unworthy of standing beside a man of his caliber. He seemed to enjoy watching her face crumble with each cruel word, while Vanessa smirked triumphantly, basking in the glow of attention. When dinner was served, Daniel purposely made a spectacle by rejecting the dish Isabella had prepared earlier at home, mocking it as food fit for dogs in front of dignitaries and socialites. Isabella sat frozen, her heart pounding, her dignity stripped away in front of strangers. Vanessa leaned close to whisper something venomous, her smile dripping with cruelty. It was not just a night of humiliation. It was Daniel's way of reminding Isabella that she was nothing more than an accessory in his grand image. As tears burned her eyes, she realized her husband's heart was never hers, and perhaps never would be. Weeks of humiliation piled on Isabella's shoulders until the day Daniel finally announced his decision. He wanted a divorce. He declared it coldly, sliding the papers across the marble dining table like a business transaction, with Vanessa's perfume still lingering in the air from her visit. Isabella's lips trembled as she pleaded, begging him to reconsider, reminding him of their vows and the life they had once dreamed of building. But Daniel's face remained hard, his eyes filled only with disgust. To him, Isabella was dead weight, while Vanessa was a jewel he believed he deserved. Her tears fell freely as she tried to hold on to a crumbling marriage, but Daniel's words cut her deep in the blade of any knife. "You mean nothing to me. Vanessa is the woman I should have married." The papers were signed, and with them, Isabella was stripped of her home, her security, and what little pride she had left. She was left with nothing but a few belongings and her faith, stepping out into the cold world with nowhere to go. It felt like the end of her story, but in truth, it was only the painful beginning of something greater. With no family to turn to and no roof over her head, Isabella wandered the streets at night, clutching a small bag of clothes. The world she had once known, grand banquets, chauffeur-driven cars, expensive dresses, was now replaced by cold benches and borrowed blankets. Rain soaked her hair as she huddled under a bus stop one evening, whispering prayers through chattering teeth. Despite the shame of her situation, her faith did not waver. She believed that God would somehow deliver her, though the path seemed dark and endless. She found solace in the one place she had always loved, the church. Though she had nothing left, she gave her time to scrubbing the pews, polishing the altar, and sweeping the floors. Each morning, she would kneel in silence, asking for strength and guidance. The church became her refuge, a place where she was no longer judged, where her tears could fall without ridicule. Unbeknownst to her, every act of service, every moment of faith, was preparing her for the miracle that lay ahead, a miracle that would come disguised as an unexpected opportunity. One crisp morning, as Isabella scrubbed the marble floors of the church, she overheard two parishioners discussing the president's villa. They spoke excitedly about the palace's announcement, They were hiring experienced chefs to serve the president and his esteemed guests. Isabella paused, her heart racing. She had no formal culinary certificate, but she was an excellent cook. Her late mother had taught her how to create magic from simple ingredients. Cooking was one of the few joys she had always carried with her. Though fear whispered that she would never be accepted, faith pushed her forward. After the service, Isabella borrowed a pen and paper from the church office and carefully wrote her application. She carried it nervously to the palace, her hands trembling as she submitted it. Days later, when the call came, her heart soared. She had been selected for an interview. It was the first glimmer of hope in her darkened world. With borrowed clothes and trembling steps, Isabella walked into the palace, praying silently that this chance could change her life. The kitchen of the president's villa bustled with activity as Isabella nervously tied her apron. She felt out of place among the professionally trained chefs in crisp uniforms, their confidence radiating through every motion. Her heart pounded as she prepared her first meal, a simple but flavorful dish that reflected the warmth of her late mother's recipes. To her surprise, her meal caught the attention of the head chef, who praised the balance of flavors. It was unlike anything else served that day, humble yet extraordinary. Isabella was hired, not for her certificates, but for her natural gift. Each day, she poured her soul into the meals she prepared, arriving before dawn and leaving long after dark. She worked tirelessly, never complaining, her quiet strength inspiring even those who looked down on her. Her presence in the villa did not go unnoticed, not by the staff, and certainly not by President Adrian Carter himself, who one day would be served by her hand in a way neither of them could forget. It was a warm afternoon when Isabella, carrying a silver tray of water, accidentally stumbled as she approached the president's table. The glass tipped and droplets splashed onto Adrian Carter's suit. Gasps filled the dining hall, and Isabella froze, her face draining of color. Terrified, she fell to her knees and begged him not to dismiss her. Memories of Daniel's cruelty flashed in her mind. She had no doubt punishment would follow. But Adrian's reaction was nothing like what she expected. He simply smiled, waved his staff away, and helped her rise to her feet. "It's only water," he said kindly, brushing his jacket. "Mistakes happen." His words struck Isabella's heart like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For the first time in years, a man in authority had treated her with kindness instead of scorn. She bowed deeply, gratitude flooding her chest. Adrian's eyes lingered on her longer than necessary, noticing the humility and sincerity radiating from her. That small encounter planted a seed that neither of them realized would soon grow into something life-changing. From that day forward, Adrian found himself noticing Isabella more often. He would see her in the kitchens, sleeves rolled up, focused on perfecting every dish. He noticed how she never complained, how she treated everyone, from the guards to the maids, with respect. Her diligence reminded him of the values he rarely saw in the world of politics and power. It intrigued him. He began asking questions about her, learning that she was not formally trained but had earned her place through hard work and dedication. Isabella, on the other hand, tried to keep her distance. She never imagined the president would take interest in a lowly chef. She focused on her duties, hiding her pain and passed behind a quiet smile. But Adrian could not ignore the way his heart stirred whenever she entered the room. It was not just admiration for her work. It was something deeper, something he had not expected to feel again. Slowly, fate was weaving their lives together in ways neither of them could yet comprehend. Weeks turned into months, and Adrian found excuses to linger near the kitchens more often. Sometimes he asked for her opinion on meals. Sometimes he simply observed. Isabella, though shy, began to relax in his presence. Their conversations, though brief, carried warmth and honesty. She shared small glimpses of her love for cooking, her faith, and her gratitude for the chance to work at the villa. Adrian, in turn, spoke about his admiration for humility and kindness, qualities he seldom encountered in his world of politics. Though Isabella kept her heart guarded, afraid of repeating the pain Daniel had inflicted, she could not deny the comfort she felt around Adrian. His gentleness was in stark contrast to the cruelty she had endured. The bond between them grew quietly, unnoticed by many, but powerful enough to change the course of their futures. It was in the unspoken glances, the shared smiles, and the silent understanding that something far greater was blossoming, something neither of them could resist forever. One evening, as the golden sun dipped behind the palace gardens, Adrian asked Isabella to walk with him. She hesitated, nervous about being seen, but he reassured her. Beneath the blooming flowers, he confessed what had been stirring in his heart. He admired her, respected her, and wanted her by his side, not just as a worker, but as a partner. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. After all she had endured, could this be real? She wanted to believe him, but fear of betrayal whispered in her mind. Adrian took her trembling hands in his, vowing never to treat her as less than she deserved. His sincerity broke through her walls, and with tears in her eyes, Isabella whispered her truth. She had been hurt, humiliated, and abandoned, but she still believed in love. That night, under the starlit sky, they began a love story hidden from the world. Their marriage would soon follow, secret and sacred, known only to a few. Little did they know that destiny was preparing the stage for a moment when their love would be tested and revealed in the most public and dramatic way imaginable. The palace chapel was quiet, lit only by flickering candles, when Adrian Carter took Isabella's hand in marriage. It was not a lavish wedding filled with guests and photographers. It was intimate, attended only by 2 trusted aides and a priest. Isabella wore a simple ivory dress borrowed from the palace seamstress, her beauty radiating not from diamonds or gold, but from the peace and joy that filled her heart. As she whispered her vows, tears streamed down her face, not tears of sorrow this time, but gratitude. She could not believe that after being cast aside by Daniel, she was now the beloved wife of the most powerful man in the country. Adrian's voice was steady as he promised to honor and cherish her. Unlike Daniel's vows, which had been empty words, Adrian's promises carried the weight of sincerity. When he kissed her forehead, Isabella felt a sense of safety she had never known. Yet, both understood the necessity of keeping their union a secret. For now, Adrian had political enemies, and Isabella's past could be twisted by the media. Their love was sacred, but hidden, waiting for the right moment to be unveiled. Until then, they lived as husband and wife behind closed doors, building a foundation of trust and love. Life as the secret wife of the president was surreal for Isabella. She continued working in the villa kitchen, blending in with the staff, while secretly sharing late-night dinners and heartfelt conversations with Adrian. The simplicity of their moments, sharing tea in the garden, laughing over small mistakes, praying together, made her realize that love did not need grandeur to be genuine. For the first time, she no longer felt invisible. She was cherished, and she carried herself with quiet dignity. But even in her joy, she remained cautious. The ghost of Daniel's cruelty lingered in her memory, and she often wondered if he or Vanessa would ever cross her path again. Adrian reassured her constantly, telling her that no one could harm her while she was under his protection. Still, Isabella knew life had a way of bringing the past forward at the most unexpected times. She prayed that when the moment came, she would be strong enough to face it, not knowing destiny was already weaving their paths toward dramatic confrontation. As the year drew to a close, the nation prepared for grand end-of-year gala, an annual event where the president delivered a speech to inspire hope for the coming year. Adrian decided this would be the moment to introduce Isabella to the world, not just as his chef or staff, but as his wife. He wanted the people to see her humility and strength, to understand that she was not chosen for status or wealth, but for the values she embodied. It was a bold decision, one that carried risks, but Adrian's heart was firm. When he told Isabella of his plan, her eyes widened with fear. Memories of her public humiliations haunted her, and the thought of standing before powerful dignitaries terrified her. Yet Adrian held her hands and assured her that she would not stand alone this time. "You are my wife," he said firmly, "and the world will honor you because I honor you." His words calmed her trembling spirit. Though nervous, Isabella agreed. She knew this moment was not just about her marriage. It was about reclaiming her dignity in front of a world that once mocked her. The evening of the gala arrived, and the grand hall sparkled with gold chandeliers and the sound of violins. World leaders, ambassadors, and society's elite filled the room, all waiting for the president's speech. Isabella entered quietly on Adrian's arm, dressed in an elegant gown that seemed to glow against her dark complexion. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Few had ever seen her before, and none suspected her true identity. She walked with grace, though inside her heart pounded like a drum. Across the room, Daniel and Vanessa made their entrance. Vanessa wore a dazzling red dress, clinging to Daniel's arm with pride. They were certain of their superiority, believing themselves untouchable. But when Vanessa's eyes landed on Isabella, her face twisted with disdain. She nudged Daniel, whispering spiteful words as jealousy burned in her chest. To her, Isabella was still the timid, discarded wife, someone she could toy with for amusement. Little did she know, the woman before her was no longer a victim, but the wife of the president. Throughout the evening, Vanessa kept her eyes locked on Isabella. She watched the way Adrian guided her gently, the way people looked curiously at the woman by the president's side. Envy gnawed at her like fire. How could Isabella, the woman she had mocked and humiliated for years, stand so confidently in such a place of honor? To Vanessa, it was intolerable. She whispered plans to Daniel, who was equally unsettled, though his reasons were different. Seeing Isabella radiant and admired reopened the wounds of his arrogance and regret. He had tossed her aside, convinced she was worthless, but now she stood higher than him in stature. The tension thickened as the evening progressed. Vanessa plotted silently, determined to remind Isabella of her place. She had humiliated her once, and she would do it again, this time in front of the entire world. Fueled by jealousy and pride, Vanessa clutched her wine glass tightly, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Daniel, though hesitant, said nothing. His silence would soon cost him dearly. As the music softened and the crowd turned their attention toward Adrian preparing for his speech, Vanessa seized her moment. With a sly smile, she called loudly for everyone's attention. All eyes turned to her as she stepped toward Isabella, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Some people," she sneered, raising her glass, "don't belong among the refined." With that, she tipped her drink, spilling the crimson liquid onto Isabella's gown. Gasps erupted across the hall as the wine stained the fabric. Dripping down in humiliation, Vanessa smirked, expecting Isabella to crumble as she once had. Daniel stood beside her, smirking faintly, though unease flickered in his eyes. For a brief second, the hall was silent, everyone waiting to see Isabella's reaction. Isabella's chest rose and fell as she fought the urge to shrink back into her old self. But before she could speak, a commanding voice thundered through the hall, Adrian's. The president himself had stepped forward, his expression fierce. His next words would change the course of the night. "Enough!" Adrian's voice echoed, silencing the whispers. He stepped to Isabella's side, taking her hand and pulling her gently forward. "You have insulted my wife," he declared firmly, his gaze piercing Vanessa and Daniel like fire. The hall erupted in shock. Gasps and murmurs filled the air as everyone processed the revelation. Isabella, the woman Vanessa had just humiliated, was not a servant or a guest. She was the first lady of the nation. Vanessa's smirk vanished instantly, her face draining of color. Daniel staggered backward, disbelief written all over him. He had divorced Isabella, mocked her, cast her out as nothing, only to find out she had risen higher than he could ever dream. The guests looked on with a mix of awe and outrage, some applauding Adrian's boldness, while others shook their heads at Vanessa's audacity. The humiliation Vanessa had intended for Isabella had turned into her own undoing, and the consequences were about to unfold. Adrian's guard stepped forward at his command, surrounding Vanessa and Daniel. "Take them," he ordered. Vanessa's protest filled the hall, her shrill voice breaking through the air. "You can't do this to me. I'm the one he loves," she screamed, pointing at Daniel, who stood frozen in shame. But her words only fueled the crowd's disgust. Daniel tried to defend himself, stammering excuses, but the guards seized him as well. Together, the two were led out of the gala, their reputations destroyed in front of the entire nation's elite. Isabella stood silently, tears filling her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming justice of the moment. For the first time, she was not the victim of humiliation, but the woman who stood protected, respected, and honored. Adrian squeezed her hand gently, reassuring her that she was safe and loved. The tables had turned, and the world would never see her the same again. Sitting in the cold prison cell, Daniel replayed his life over and over in his mind. He thought of the nights he mocked Isabella, the cruel words he had spoken, and the way he had thrown her out as though she were worthless. Now, stripped of his power, wealth, and dignity, he realized the truth. Isabella had been the treasure he never valued. Regret burned in his chest like fire, but it was too late. He had lost her forever, and she now stood beyond his reach as the wife of the president. Vanessa, on the other hand, cursed and ranted, unable to accept her downfall. She blamed everyone but herself, spitting venom at Daniel, at Isabella, even at fate itself. But her words meant nothing now. The world had seen her for who she truly was, and there was no redemption waiting at the end of her road. The following morning, the nation's headlines exploded with the story of the president's secret marriage and the scandal at the gala. Some were shocked, others inspired, but all eyes were on Isabella. She had gone from a discarded wife to the First Lady, a story of resilience and grace that stirred the hearts of many. As she stood beside Adrian during a press conference, wearing a simple yet elegant dress, she spoke with poise. "I am proof that no matter how low life pushes you, with faith and perseverance, you can rise again." Her words brought thunderous applause. Adrian looked at her with pride, his heart swelling with love. Together, they had faced humiliation, betrayal, and hardship, but now they walked into a new season, hand in hand, unshaken and unbroken. Isabella had not only found love again, but she had also found her voice, her dignity, and her destiny. As the sun set behind the palace, she whispered a prayer of gratitude. Her story had been rewritten, and the woman who was once mocked and abandoned was now celebrated as the nation's First Lady. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.